to the loss of life in the current conflict and result of terrorist attacks in Israel. The deepest sympathies of the New South Wales Police goes for those victims and the loss of life that's been experienced so far. Can I indicate, however, that it's fully expected that those terrorist attacks and the resulting responses will have a long tail for the foreseeable future, and we need to be prepared for that as the New South Wales Police Force. As such, today we announce the commencement of Operation Shelter, which will be conducted under the auspices of Deputy Commissioner Lanyon, which will coordinate our New South Wales Police Force response to the activities that lay in front of us. In essence, the operation will capture all intelligence available to us in relation to community sentiment, potential protest activity and potential demonstrations that might take place in the future. It will coordinate all community engagement activities that we conduct within the New South Wales community amongst different parts of our organisation. It will have a legal component providing advice to Mr Lanyon and the New South Wales Police Force Executive. It will be monitoring the submission of all Form 1s that take place or are submitted by potential protest groups or assembly groups that propose to meet in relation to the conflict. It will allocate resources where required to potential activity, and it will monitor all police activities in relation to that. Captured by that will also be our presence at a number of institutions, our patrolling capacity and our visibility around the community. Can I say that this is not ideal and that we have to take these steps to coordinate our activity across the state? Obviously there's been a fair bit of activity over the past few days, which we believe will continue into the foreseeable future. And I think it's incumbent upon us to stand up this standalone operation to coordinate the activities not just within the city region, but also across the broader state of New South Wales. The intent of the operation is to ensure community safety. That's always our primary purpose. That is always our primary intent. And we will take any steps to ensure that. Having announced that operation, I'm quite prepared to take questions on what has transpired so far and what might be transpiring in the future.
Has Form 1 for a protest plan for this weekend been rejected? The organisers have said that it has, and if so, why?
Form 1 has been submitted for proposed activities on Sunday. That Form 1 has been submitted outside of the 7-day time limit for us to appropriately consider it. For a assembly to be determined authorised, it needs to be submitted within 7 days of the event. So police are currently in negotiations with the organisers of that proposed event to explain that to them.
So it won't be happening? So it won't be happening?
In our opinion, it won't be happening. It's unauthorised at this stage. It wasn't submitted to us in the appropriate time frame. There may be suggestions back to the organisers. They might decide to move it. If that's the case, then we will consider action in the Supreme Court to prevent it.
Can you stop, Dave, them gathering at Town Hall in some sort of, say there's 1,000 people, you can't stop them doing that, can you?
We don't have the powers to stop people attending Town Hall. We do have the powers. What a Form 1 and an in the appropriate time frame, if it is submitted within that 7 days, and we don't object to that, what that Form 1 does, it makes it an authorised protest, that we don't object to it, and that protects the participants from certain offences in relation to obstruction of traffic, walking on the roadways and doing a number of other things. When a protest is unauthorised, people who meet for that purpose do not have those protections.
When you say the negotiations to move it, are you saying physically move the location or move it to a later date?
Because the Form 1 hasn't been submitted within the required timeframe, they can make application to defer that protest or that gathering on Sunday to a later time, giving them sufficient time to submit an appropriate Form 1. I can indicate if that takes place, that gives us the opportunity of taking them to the Supreme Court to have that assembly determined to be unlawful.
What's the I know we're talking about hypotheticals here, but let's just say a large group does form a town hall without that Form 1 authorisation, and then that group then begins to chant anti-Semitic slogans. What happens then?
We will have a large policing presence available to us, depending upon how the negotiations go over the next couple of days, to circumvent that, because that does become an authorised protest or assembly. I can indicate that I would urge anyone who is considering attending Town Hall, if they have received notification about that assembly, to monitor the situation closely. We will be doing further communications closer to the timeframe once negotiations with those organisers have been resolved. However, at this stage, I would encourage people not to attend that assembly on Sunday that is currently proposed, because they do have no protections that come from the appropriate issue of a Form 1 for breaking the law, and they'll be dealt with appropriately.
The Premier apologised this morning for allowing that group of people to march towards Opera House and then to congregate there. Was that appropriate in hindsight?
The decision to allow that to happen was based on late information received by the New South Wales Police Force that a proposed assembly at the Town Hall, which had been organised, although the Form 1 had not been submitted in the appropriate time, obviously, but it happened very shortly, as Sundays is after the event that happened in the Middle East, was proposing to march to the Sydney Opera House. That information came late to us. The operational advice that we received from the Commander at Central Metropolitan Region, who, bearing in mind, deals with 1,800 protests per year, was that we were better to facilitate that march to the Sydney Opera House. They had a point of destination, undesirable for everyone, how it may have been, but we had no power, if we didn't facilitate that march, to stop people walking down there anyway, along the footpath, lawfully abiding and obeying the law to get to Sydney Opera House. Coupled with that, there was social media talk for people to attend the Sydney Opera House directly, who are external to the protest at Sydney Town Hall. The decision was made, and we support that decision. We continue to support that decision to facilitate the march, to ensure we could control that, to ensure that we would prevent an escalation of that, to ensure that we could direct that march along an appropriate pathway, so that it would cause the least angst to traffic, it would cause the least angst to the community, and would ensure public safety.
But if they try that again on Sunday, you won't allow it to happen.
That's correct.
What's the intel on Sunday's protest? Is it expected, like internally, what's the intel? Is it expected to be larger than Monday's? The same sort of scenes? Is there kind of early talk about what it could be like?
At the Town Hall on Monday evening, we believe there was approximately 500. There might be more than that anticipated. However, as I said, we would encourage people not to attend. We will be doing further messaging on that later this week, once those negotiations with the organisers have been fully completed.
When will you step in? When will you step in if they access or block the road, or if they say anything anti-Semitic in their speeches? Will you step in there?
They will be operational decisions for being on the ground on the day. We'll be giving quite acute instructions to our forward commanders in relation to the activities. I can say we have received criticism over the last few days for not making more arrests on Monday night. Investigations into those matters are continuing. Identification of the individuals involved in that proved exceptionally difficult at the time. So we are going through an investigative process at the moment, and if we can identify offenders from Monday committing offences, we will take action.
Is
So
it,
can I ask
is
a
it
criticism
illegal
that you
to?
received on about Monday's protest about not making more arrests? There's also been quite a lot of criticism around police allowing the anti-Semitic chants and
I can totally understand the public sentiment. But I think it's important to remember too that moving forward and the current circumstances over in Israel and the conflict with the terrorist group Hamas will be ongoing, and this is about moving forward, not looking backwards. I can totally understand the criticism that happened on Monday. However, that was a quick moving escalation in activities that the commanders on the ground dealt with as they saw fit at the time. I can understand how certain members of the community would be disappointed in that response, and certainly the Jewish community. And we are working with the Jewish community to try and explain to them what our actions were on Monday and how that came about.
You seem to be that this
For the
activity.
safety of the Jewish community in New South Wales and bolstering security around schools or synagogues?
Part of Operation Shelter incorporates that. We're having high visibility operations around synagogues, around Jewish schools, and speaking to the Jewish Board of Deputies this morning, we are going to also increase visibility around Jewish hospitals and retirement villages.